General chat, live show?
That is what it says, isn't it? General chat, live show, ?
Well, we did the live show.
Oh, I see. No, what they mean is general chat about the live show.
Oh, I see. Do we go
How was the live show?
up at the end of the sentence?
Live show?
I thought we did okay. I think everyone enjoyed it.
Did you like the pulpit?
I liked climbing into the pulpit, but not so much as I would want to do that for a job.
Highlight for me was Ollie Fox playing the clarinet when we were doing questions. And Ollie, who is a brilliant clarinet player, but famously doesn't like to be thrown curveballs. Mm-hmm. Ollie likes to know what he's doing in advance. So, of course, he learnt note for note the piece of music that we usually play, only to be informed like 10 seconds before he did it by Simon Poole that we didn't have the rights to play the piece that he had learned. Could he just improvise something that sounded close enough that it was recognisable, but far enough away that it would get through the PRS? And Ollie, of course, did brilliantly, and then sent me a text which was, Mark, we've talked about this. Can I ask you if you've noticed something different about me?
Well, you're holding up your hands. You've still got 5 fingers on each hand.
Yes, but what haven't I got?
You haven't got a wedding ring on.
Yeah, so...
Is that bad news? Is there something...
Yeah.
What the good lady professor is...
She's finally had enough.
She's gone off with someone else?
So I had a thing, other people may have had this. So I haven't taken my wedding ring off since I got married, which is 30-something years ago. Or indeed, I have a little finger ring that I wear that's my grandfather's. My hands have got, well, larger, fatter, whatever it is, over the years. Yep. And my wedding ring, somehow my finger started to swell, and the swelling happened behind the wedding ring. And the next thing I knew, it was like, oh, this isn't good. I can't get my wedding ring off. I can't get it off because my hand's gone. And so it had to be cut off.
Your finger?
Yeah, they had to cut my finger off.
So is that a new finger?
They put it back on again. All you can see is the thing.
So is that AI that they
It
used?
is AI did that, yeah. AI did that. But have you ever had... Anyway, so I took it to the jewellers and they're fixing it. And I've now had a message from them saying it's all ready to be fixed. But does yours... You can take them both off? Because you have slender hands. You have the hands of a Disney princess, and I have the hands of Shrek.
That's actually true. I have just taken both. I have 2 rings on that finger, and they both come off.
Well, I'm going to the jewellers this weekend to get back both of my rings, and then I'll feel happy. But actually, I feel naked. I feel weirdly undressed.
Because you can't fiddle with it.
Well, it's just because it's been there for 31 years, and it's just really, really weird not to have it. I'm just surprised that you hadn't noticed.
Well, assuming that you're not too discombobulated, what are you going to be reviewing later?
Oh, we have a packed show.
Do we?
Yes. Reality, which is a really interesting drama. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, Spider-Man : Across the Spider-Verse. And... Are we saying Boogeyman?
Well, that's how it's written.
It's written Boogeyman, but because I would say Bogeyman, but Boogeyman with our special guest.
Who is Rob Savage, who is the director of that movie, and you'll be hearing from him later. Also, in Extra Takes, at least another 90 minutes of this complete nonsense. A weekend watch list and the weekend not list. 1 film to set the Betamax for over the weekend and 1 to avoid. Take it or leave it, you decide. Obviously, we're talking about Succession.
And it will be spoiler-tastic, so don't listen to it until you've seen Succession.
Which I think is fair enough, because all the reviews have basically said, you cannot talk about Succession without spoiling it. No. So that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, exactly. It's out. It's out in the world.
It is. And your extra reviews?
2. We have Amanda, which is an Italian comedy, which every time I say Italian, my kids laugh at me because they think I say it funny.
How do you say it?
Italian.
How else do you say Italian?
Tell me. I got no idea, but they laugh about the way I say it. And then the old man movie, Lactopolis. I'll tell you again. The old man movie, Lactopolis.
Your kids are laughing at you again.
They are. Which is an Estonian stop-motion cartoon animation, which honestly defies description.
Okay, something to look forward to.
Yes.
Pretentious Moi will be back. Currently, Mark Kermode 15 versus Mark Kermode 12. 1 frame back is Spider-Man movies. Yes, all of them. And you can support us via Apple Podcasts or head to extratakes.com for non-fruit related devices. And if you're already a Vanguardista, as always, we salute you. Hey, you. Yes, you. Why not come along to the Kermode and Mayo merchandise store, located handily on your web browser or mobile device?
Yes, inside we have a wide range of leisure wear, clothing, drinks containers, and even furniture.
And let's not forget the signed posters.
Or the Torch and Pen Vanguardista gift set.
Or for our American listeners, the Flashlight and Pen Vanguardista gift sets.
You can say hello to Jason Isaacs every time you take a sip of export-strength Jamaican rum or homemade bathtub gin in our Hello to Jason Isaacs bottle, as used by the celebrated actor Jason Isaacs.
You know, him off the films and that.
And telly.
Yeah. So why not head to store.kermodeandmayo.com now?
Now!
Thanks. I feel as though we should have had shiny jackets for that.
Sanjeev said that every time we do an advert, he laughs.
Quite correctly, I think. That is correct.
I'm not sure if he's laughing with us or at us.
Pete says, hello Sanjeev.
Hello Sanjeev.
Pete says, Mark Simon, long-time listener, first-time emailer. Last week, Sean emailed the show asking for other suggestions for one-act U movies. The idea being you can watch any movie with a dire outcome and leave after the first act, making it a rather lovely film. As Sean explained, his young kids can't handle the mildest of threat. I thought it was a really good idea.
Yeah.
He then went on to suggest Jurassic Park as the film to trial this new idea. Where Sean's suggested movie instantly falls down is that in the opening scene, we see a man being eaten alive by a crazed and caged velociraptor on a dark, stormy, windswept island.
Good point.
While his co-workers scream in terror at the horror of what they're witnessing. I hope Sean hasn't pressed ahead this past weekend and shown his kids this movie, as I imagine he'll now be in a similar position to me, where he has a child who is terrified of any film I now suggest we watch, and also a wife who still hasn't quite forgiven me. Love the podcast. Keep up.
And weirdly enough, the theme of children being terrified by dinosaurs will come up later on in the show.
It will. Brad Hodgson in North Shields. In The Shining, the Torrance so his suggestion is to for the one act you to watch The Shining with your kids of all ages.
Okay.
The Torrance family take over the remote Overlook Hotel in the Rocky Mountains for its winter season. Here the family enjoy the cavernous expanses of the closed hotel, and young Danny has the time of his life using the hotel as his tricycle racetrack. A light-hearted and family-orientated picture. What could possibly go wrong?
Well, yes, except that you have to get through the scene at the beginning where Jack Nicholson does the interview, in which he is clearly completely mad. I mean, that is the problem with The Shining, is that Jack Torrance, as played by Jack Nicholson, is bonkers from the outset.
So the one act you is proving slightly
harder,
more problematic. Kevin Rice, PhD student, microbiology, Oregon State University.
Yeah.
I am writing this after Dear Ophelia and The Pale Man. I am writing after hearing your discussion last week about films where the first act is fun for the whole family, but the rest is very much not, with the correspondent citing the opening 30 of Jurassic Park. To this end, I would like to submit Takashi Miike's 1999 film Audition.
Yeah, actually, that is a good call.
As an offbeat romantic comedy about a movie producer finding love after tragedy.
Yeah.
Takes a slightly different tone after that, but hey, who am I to judge? Kiri, 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 says Kevin Rice. So I think this could run.
Yeah.
Any other movies which obviously are not for family viewing, but in the opening, say, 20 minutes, 30 minutes are perfectly fine.
If I could just remind you of my own personal experience of Audition, I went to see it at the Edinburgh Film Festival with Trevor Johnson, who's now been married for many years to a Japanese woman. He was learning Japanese. Hello, Trevor and Tommy. And he said, should we go and see this film at the festival? I don't know anything about it other than it's Japanese, and I'm trying to polish up my Japanese. And we went to see it. We knew nothing about it at all. It was Audition. That's what we knew. And it starts off as a rom-com about an awkward movie producer who appears to be auditioning for a film, but is actually auditioning for a girlfriend. And it was sweet and funny, and then it turns into hell on wheels.
Right.
And it was just, by the end of it, we were literally hiding behind the seats in front of us. We had no idea where it was going.
Okay, there needs to be like a little flag that drops into the top corner that goes, leave now. Leave now. It's not being a you from here on in. If you have anything to contribute to that, correspondence@kermodeandmayo.com. That's our email, correspondence@kermodeandmayo.com. Tell us something that's new and groovy.
Reality. Do you know the story of Reality Winner?
I do not.
The person. Okay, so Reality Winner was an NSA contracted translator, former US Air Force vet, who in June 2017, 2 FBI agents arrived at her house. They said, we have a warrant to search your house. Do you know why we're here? And she sort of wasn't sure why they were here. But what then happens is that they then interviewed her over a period of an hour or so, and they recorded the interview with her outside her house and then inside the house. The search team turns up, takes over the house, and then they move into the house. They're trying to find a room that they can interview her in, but it's a small house, and there's only one room, a room that she says is weird and creepy because it's out behind the kitchen and it's not clean, but there are no chairs. So there is an audio recording of this. That then ended up in a really, really harsh prosecution. This is a historical case, so people may well know the details of it. In case anyone doesn't, I won't say any more than that, because there is a possibility that if you don't know it, I don't want to spoil the film, although actually the fact that people don't know what happened to Reality Winner is astonishing. She was very, very severely punished, essentially for the mishandling of classified documents. That transcript was, in 2019, turned into a verbatim play by Tina Satter. And verbatim theatre, which is you take actual transcripts and you dramatise them. That has now been turned into a film by Tina Satter, starring Sydney Sweeney, who is absolutely terrific as Reality Winner. And we are told very early on, there's a thing at the beginning which says everything that you're going to see is taken directly from the transcripts of the FBI recording of the two FBI agents, then joined by a whole other team of people who carried out the interview. So we have, firstly, this sense of authenticity. What you're hearing actually happened. It's a dramatised version of it, but the words are what actually happened. Every now and then, during the interrogation, we see little flashes of like a real photograph of Reality Winner, social media posts. There are strange moments in which the conversation has been redacted, in which what we're watching suddenly has got like a kind of weird David Lynchian ellipse, in which somebody's saying something and then suddenly they'll disappear from the frame during the redacted sequence.
Can I just ask, is Reality Winner...
her name.
It's actually the name. It's
Yes.
not like a nickname?
No, that's her name. Reality Lee Winner, that is her name.
Wow.
Yes.
Thank you.
And apparently, I believe this is correct, her parents were because they wanted, as their daughter, a real winner. And apparently that's where the name came from. But that is her real name. So what happens over the course of this drama, it's 84 minutes long, is she comes home, the two FBI agents are there, they immediately accost her, they show that they're recording, they say they have a search warrant. There's a lot of kind of small talk about, okay, we're going to have to go into the house, and okay, fine, well, I've got a cat and a dog in the house, and there's a lot of stuff about, well, how are we going to deal with the dog? Well, the dog needs to be taken out and put in a pen. Would you please shut the door because the cat may run? So there's all this very quotidian, very sort of ordinary procedural stuff going on. Have you got groceries? Do the groceries need to go into the fridge? Can we get into the thing? Yeah, no, you can't go into the house yet because people are coming in. Do you know what this is about? And the whole thing has a kind of Kafka-esque quality to it, because you all you hear is what she is being told, which is that they're not telling her what it's about, but does she know what it's about? Does she know what she's meant to have done? Do we know anything about the context of this? Now, obviously, if you are, for example, particularly interested in American politics, which I am, you do know the story. But if you don't, it's kind of even weirder, because all the way through there is this absolute tension between this is normal, but it's also completely abnormal. There's one moment she says, "Am I going to jail tonight?" And there's something about the understatement of that question, also because you know that was actually how it was asked. Am I going to jail tonight? Which is such a specific question. It's not just like, am I going to jail, but am I going to jail tonight? The whole thing plays out in very sort of, the visuals of it are very kind of unforgiving, sort of handheld. Once they get into the house and they get into the room, which she has described as weird and creepy, which is funny because there is something really, really weird and creepy about the whole drama. It's in this kind of unforgiving, strip-lit environment that feels like you're watching a documentary, but also feels like everything there's a sense of heightened reality about it. There is an absolutely brilliant score by Nathan Mikke, who did the stuff for Industry on the television. And the score has got this kind of sense of throbbing unease. It's almost like a science fiction score. At times it reminded me of Mika Levy's score for Under the Skin, which I absolutely love. So that these incredibly innocuous exchanges about, do you need to go and do that? Do you need to just go? It's got this noise going on in the background of it that sounds maybe like it's the noise in her head or maybe it's because the whole world is shifting on its axis and the world that she knew up until this point is about to be irrevocably changed. It's also worth contextualizing it and saying that, of course, when they turned up and they're talking about the mishandling of classified documents, this is what they want to talk to her about. They are essentially carrying out a warrant that is under the Espionage Act, the 1917 Espionage Act. Ironically, of course, that's the same act that would later be cited in the raid on Mar-a-Lago when it turned out that Trump had just quite coincidentally stashed a whole bunch of classified documents that obviously he was able to magically declassify with his mind.
Should he be severely punished, do you think?
Let's wait and see.
Shall we wait
what happens to Trump.
The wheels of justice will turn slowly.
Yes, and the arc of history inclines, what is it? The arc of history is long, but inclines toward justice. Although I think it's...
I
think it's extremely unlikely that the kind of sanctions that were dished out to Reality Winner would ever come back to the, Mango Mussolini.
Also, that quote, I know this is a sidebar.
Yeah.
It depends where in the world you live, I think, as to whether you might go along with the fact whether the arc of history
precisely
towards justice.
Anyway, this is a really, really gripping film. It's something so unsettling about it. It's such a brilliant technique. A fantastic central performance by Sydney Sweeney, who was, of course, in White Lotus as the stroppy teenager who's, it's a really, really great performance. You absolutely believe in her. There's something palm sweating about it. As I was watching,
how would you classify? Is this a thriller?
Well, weirdly enough, it kind of is. Although it's literally a thriller in which two people turn up and question somebody about mishandling of documents. But I found it really anxiety-inducing, like really properly panic attack inducing, and I thought it was really well done. It's called Reality, which is the name of the central character, and it's directed, as I said, by Tina Satter, based on a verbatim play, based on the verbatim transcripts of the FBI turning up at Reality Winner's house. It's really something.
Because when I get emails from streaming companies saying we got a new TV series or we got a new film, it always has like 3 words to describe, disturbing, comedic, French.
That's right, French.
Really? No, don't want to watch that. Or, so I'm thinking, so those 3 words for if you're writing them for this.
Yeah. Anxiety-inducing procedural.
Okay, there you go. Okay, so that's Reality.
Reality.
A movie?
A movie, yes.
Okay. What I meant was cinema.
Yes, and I meant yes when we said that, yes.
Still to come on this fabulous podcast.
This involves me getting back into the script. Hold on one second, because it's on me. No. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and the Boogeyman.
We'll be back. Oh, by the way, Rob Savage is on the way to talk about
that's what I was
aforementioned movie. We're going to be back before you can say La liberté, est-ce que tu fais avec ce qui t'a été fait? Which, as you know, is Jean-Paul Sartre. Freedom is what you do with what's been done to you.
Oh,
I know. Well, here we go with an email from Tom Savage, box office top 10 in a moment. Tom Savage, BA Honours, including History of Journalism, winner of a copy of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy on the Janice Long Show in 1991.
That's a prize to cherish.
Dear Dashing and Dotty, I fear your talk of N dashes, this is EN dashes,
yes,
may have woken Compositor's Corner with a jolt.
Oh dear.
You'll obviously find us sitting over by the old font, which is actually...
That's very good. That's a good joke.
I assume, and maybe the best joke in the podcast.
Okay.
I assume I will be emailing number 703 on the subject, but in case it adds anything, some history.
Here we are.
Colon. N dashes, EN, and their big brother M dashes, EM, hark back to the typeset days of newspapers when every line of text was set out on a plate by hand,
yes,
and compositors could use them for different purposes and to take up a certain amount of space. An N dash, named because it's a dash as wide as a lowercase letter N, would be used as your caller last week said, not caller, a writer, contributor last week said, much like a colon, or within a sentence, like a comma. If you use dashes within sentences rather than within words, they should probably be N dashes. But, says Tom, no one cares. M dashes, EM, a dash as wide as a lowercase m,
okay,
have somewhat fallen out of fashion and have been replaced by the ellipsis, the ... which I overuse ridiculously.
What, when in your novels?
Yeah, all the time. To indicate, which is what the editor's for, to take them all out again, to indicate a pause in reading. They were originally as wide as the line of font was tall, and you'll often find them in historic newspaper headlines to split sections that shouldn't be read on in one go.
They're historically as wide as the line of font is tall.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Got it.
So a historical headline would go, something bad's happened, M dash, loads of people are dead.
Got it.
To accuse these characters, to access these characters on fruit-based devices, if you hold down the hyphen key, you get the option to choose an N or M dash instead. Or try typing two ordinary dashes together, then keep typing and see what happens. You might find Bill Gates pops up and turns them into an N or M dash for you.
Okay, so I'm going to hold down the hyphen key. Oh, yeah, look.
There you go.
I'd never seen that before.
And you get the choice. Hope that fills in some gaps with appropriately sized punctuation marks. Tinkety hyphen tonk. So this is how you write it.
Tinkety hyphen N dash.
Tinkety hyphen tonk N dash and down with the Nazis. And then PS, upper and lower case letters are so called because page compositors kept the letters they used to make up words in boxes. And the box or case for capital letters were physically above the one for normal letters.
Very good.
So if you wanted a capital B, you reached into the upper case and into the lower case for normal ones. Let's hear it for Compositor's Corner. Where would we be without
that? Is fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Correspondence at KermodeMayo.com. Box office top 10 at 17, Master Gardener.
Which I thought was, it's another Paul Schrader movie, therefore it is a man worrying about himself and his past and his guilt, and it's all right. I mean, it's got solid performances. Joel Edgerton is good. Schrader can't write women characters to save his life, but there we go. It's mid-range, solid Schrader.
Someone referring to themselves as Dirk 1 says, blue collar, hardcore, American Gigolo, Mishima, A Life in 4 Chapters, Light Sleeper, First Reformed, putting aside his writing credentials. Schrader has made his fair share of brilliant movies, yet all we hear about is the Exorcist prequel. That's rather unfair, as many directors have duds.
No, you don't only hear about that. When I did my review of it, I said Paul Schrader, who wrote Taxi Driver, and Paul Schrader, who made American Gigolo and Light Sleeper, and Paul Schrader, who recently made First Reformed. So, sorry, not true.
Number 10, not that's in this country, Gode Cha.
Which I haven't seen, wasn't press screen. If anybody has seen it, please let us know.
Correspondence at KermodeMayo.com. Number 9 here, number 9 in the States, Evil Dead Rise.
Guess what?
You've seen it. Excellent, great. What do you think?
I haven't seen it. It was a bank holiday.
Exactly, loads of time. You can't use bank holiday as an excuse for not seeing something.
I was having to prepare other stuff.
You're never going to see it.
I am going to see it. I am going to see it.
I don't think
I am going to see it when it comes out on DVD.
Really? Okay. Number 8, Beau is Afraid.
I almost feel like I want to throw this ball to you. Simon, Beau is Afraid.
Self-indulgent twaddle.
Did you laugh at any of the jokes?
One.
Which one was?
There was a painting of, right towards the end.
Oh, yeah, with the big eyes portrait.
Okay. But really,
I thought there were bits of it that were very... I mean, there's no question that it's self-indulgent. And certainly on the question of who did Ari Aster make this movie for, the answer is himself.
Yeah. Number 7 in the UK, 12 in the States, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret.
Loved it. And last week when we were doing the show from the Union Chapel, we had somebody speaking from the audience who absolutely felt the same way, thought the characters were terrific. She was a fan of the Judy Blume Saw. Have you read the novel?
No.
No, me neither. But 50 years old, and I have heard from many people who love the novel who love the film.
That's taken a long time, hasn't it?
50 years. I'm only saying this because obviously in your case,
I'd like to still be alive if any of my books ever make it. UK number 6, Sisu.
Which is, that great rule that we learned from the Indiana Jones movies, it's okay to do anything if they're Nazis. And so this is, it's kind of, it's Jamari Honda, and it's a brutal black comedy set at the dog end of World War II, with our hero has some gold. The Nazis want the gold. He doesn't want them to have the gold, and he must kill everyone in order to ensure that doesn't happen. Darren
Leithley in Dublin. 3 months after seeing Sisu as part of the Dublin International Film Festival, I went to see it for a second time to check that it was as good as I remembered. Simply, yes.
Yes.
Like a war comic injected with Marvel DNA, the seemingly indestructible near-silent hero takes as much as he dishes out to a horde of Nazis who are bent on stealing his gold. The over-the-top silliness, mostly notably a landmine redeployed as a frisbee,
right.
revels in blood and body parts flying out across the screen. A very good dog, too.
I would love to have been at the script meeting when they went, sorry, and then he throws the landmine at somebody's head.
Sometimes, says Darren, you just need to experience some delirious carnage.
You do.
Actually, delirious carnage is not a bad name for a...
I have all their albums.
Yeah.
Their early acoustic stuff.
That's true, but also that's a great name for a movie. But maybe
Delirious Carnage.
Delirious Carnage.
You could use it for a book.
That's true.
Itch 5, Delirious Carnage.
Can I just say, when I was saying I'd like to be alive for whenever any of my books makes it, obviously Itch did. And,
yes, I know. In Australia, are they going to do the other books? The Australian Broadcasting Company.
They're not doing. They did 2 series of Itch.
So that was 2 books.
Well, it was the first book, and then they made the rest.
They
of
made
it
the
up
rest up
because there's an awful lot in the second book, which is very expensive to me.
Does it say based on characters created by?
Yes, in the title sequence.
That's fantastic.
I just watch the title sequence every night before I go to bed.
Yeah, and then you've been going to rehearsals of the Opera Holland Park,
which is not far away now. So
I know you can't come to my. You can't come to my celebration because you're going to be watching your books performed as an opera.
Very, very peculiar. Anyway, I shall report back. Number 5 in the UK, nothing in America, Hypnotic.
Yeah. Ooh. Originally, as I said, listed on the FDA list as Hypnotic, which is a shame it isn't called that. I mean, it is dumb as nuts. And I genuinely wonder how stupid Robert Rodriguez thinks it is, since he is somebody who understands trash sensibility. It's just ridiculous. I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy it. It was so ripe and stupid, and he erased his own mind, and pain can keep the mind awake. It's just absolutely, you can feel yourself getting stupider while watching it. But I kind of enjoyed it.
Liam Young said, I thought this was the most entertaining film I've seen this year. Loved it from start to finish. The first act was like the start of an episode of The Sweeney. The whole film is tongue-in-cheek expose of how po-faced Christopher Nolan is. I thought it was a work of genius, but you need to be in on the joke. Didn't stop laughing for the whole movie. Sax Bend says,
I just don't know whether it is in on the joke. I don't know how much Robert Rodriguez thinks it's funny.
It is very silly, but in a fun, engaging 90s way. I enjoyed spotting what looked like ludicrous plot holes and then finding out that they're allowed by the revelations throughout the film. Yeah, it's not going to be close to my top 10 for the year come December, but I had a good time. It's also only 90 minutes long, so it was a good short time.
94.
UK number 4, as in America, Super Mario Brothers the movie. I think we covered that. Number 3 is Guardians of the Galaxy 3.
I had an email from Ollie Fox. Not an email, a text. I'm going to read this to you. So Ollie was, as I said, the person who was doing the Klezmer clarinet thing, and his message, which I'm just about to find now, said, it said, just seen G of the G. I have one question. Why?
Well, that's for someone else to discuss. Number 2 here, number 2 in the States is Fast X.
Fasten your seatbelts.
Fine, I think we've covered that. And number 1 here...
We need to get merchandise that says family.
That would be good. Number 1 here, number 1 in the States is The Little Mermaid. Lynn and Billy in Chandler's Ford. There's something with fins and something with legs. As a mum of a 6-year-old girl who intensely believes in fairies, witches, magic and mermaids, it was inevitable that we would make the trip to our local View to see the new Little Mermaid this half-term. I went prior to hearing Mark's review and have still not heard it whilst writing this email, but I'm fairly sure we will agree. I was bored. It was very underwhelming, with no sense of joy or wonder other than a moment of dark glee when Melissa McCarthy's Poor Unfortunate it says Poor Unfortunate Souls, so I don't get that.
That's the song.
Okay. Oh, right. Okay. The diverse cast was, well, diverse, but the acting was very one note with no emotion. My 6-year-old liked The Mermaid Tale, but told me she liked the other movie with the shells better, and she meant Marcel the Shell with shoes on. This comment made my soul happier than today's movie. Up with Isabella Rossellini and down with boring Disney remakes. Lynn and Billy in Chandler's Ford. And Lucas McQueen in Edinburgh sent a very long email, but part of it says, I gave the live-action remake of Little Mermaid a watch in IMAX on Friday afternoon, and while my up-and-down relationship with each of the recent remakes had me entering the cinema with slight trepidation, I loved Aladdin, thought it absolutely slapped. Wasn't too
Slapped?
keen. Yes, thought it absolutely slapped. Slapped what? I don't know.
That word has definitely changed its meaning.
Wasn't too keen on outings like Mulan and Lady and the Tramp, but definitely wasn't a fan of Pinocchio. Okay, I'm extremely happy to say I thoroughly enjoyed it. Rob Marshall definitely played it safe and stuck very close to the original with his interpretation of the story, but that directional decision feels more like he's trying to stay true to the heart of the source material rather than simply not being creative enough to add something new. There is some intriguing nuance added to the relationship between land and sea creatures, and certain side characters enjoy a more fleshed out role. Anyway, he says he can't wait to see it again, but he was disappointed that the crowd he went with didn't like it very much.
So in terms of its box office, it's the fifth best Memorial Day opening ever in the US, 117 million over 4 days. And here, obviously, it's gone straight to number one. Not really a surprise because the property is so well known. You know, the IP is so solid. Of course, it's going to do that kind of business. Although there is something, I think, sort of heartening about the fact that if you remember that when it was announced that it was going to be a black Ariel, a whole bunch of Fox News fed lunatic replacement theory wingnuts started going, she can't be black. Two of the reasons given were, one, the author's Danish, and also she lives under the sea. It's a mermaid. Mermaid, get over yourself. And you know, I don't think any of the live action remakes have added to the, what we'll call, for this purpose of this sentence, the cartoon originals. But you know, she's very good in the lead role. I think Melissa McCarthy has fun. I didn't need to be done, but
I think the Lynn and Billy email is interesting because if this movie really, really worked, the 6-year-old who intensely believes in fairies, witches, magic would have loved it.
Yeah,
absolutely would have loved it.
But the thing is that the original animation is so good. There is a reason why it's kind of, it's just kind of indestructible. Those classic Disneys are, I mean, it's funny we talked about classic Disneys because actually, of course, it's what's now referred to as third wave Disney, because our classic Disneys is everything up until Aristocats, you know, when the sort of narrative got lost, but Jungle Book and all that stuff. So anyway.
We'll be back in just a moment with Rob Savage, and we're talking Boogeyman. Now, our guest this week is director and screenwriter Rob Savage, known for the kind of Zoom video call horror Host,
which I loved. Yep. Creeped me right out.
Dashcam, an iPhone-based horror film Dashcam, and now The Boogeyman. You can hear my conversation with Rob after this clip from the movie.
This may seem a little out there, but when my father passed away, I felt like I could sense him watching over me sometimes. If you pay close enough attention, maybe you'll start sensing your mom too.
What about other things?
What other things?
I don't know. It's hard to see. It's like a dark thing.
I see. Well, when did you start seeing this dark thing?
Right after that man died.
That makes perfect sense.
Okay. So what is it?
Well, when there are scary things we don't understand, our minds try to fill in the blanks.
It's just like all those spooky monsters you think are hiding under your bed.
But we're going to work on that together. Okay? So it's not so scary.
That's a clip from The Boogeyman. Delighted to say I've been joined by its director, Rob Savage. Hello, Rob. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I've just come out of your movie, but I'm still in one piece.
Okay, a bit rattled.
A little bit rattled. Yes. So, first of all, congratulations on the picture. Introduce us to The Boogeyman. Introduce us to this story that you've delivered for us.
So, The Boogeyman tells the story of the Harper family, who they've just gone through a big loss. They've lost their mother and aren't dealing with it particularly well. And the therapist father, Will, gets a very strange patient who comes in to his therapy practice and spins a story about a murderous creature that may or may not have killed his 3 kids. And slowly the Harper family begin to believe they may have been infected by this same evil that takes over their household.
And that guy that wanders in, Lester Billings.
Yes.
So this is a Stephen King short story.
It is.
The fabled Stephen King short stories that have produced so many fantastic films over the years. Am I right in saying that the Lester Billings character is sort of more central, that you've pivoted a little bit towards the family?
Yeah, well, the short story is basically just 2 people in a room. It's a therapy session between Will Harper and Lester Billings, who is telling this story of the boogeyman creature that may or may not have killed his kids, and then has a very nasty surprise at the end of it. But it's 8 pages of 2 people in a room talking, so it's not the most obvious King material to adapt.
It's not even a short story, really, the way you might have it.
Yeah.
When people think of a short story, they might think of 50 pages or something.
Yes, no, it's from Night Shift. It predates, I think I'm right in saying this, the King fans will jump on me, but I think it predates Carrie. It's before he was Stephen King as we know him. This was when he was...
angry.
He was angry, and he was like waving his arms, desperately trying to get attention with these very splashy short stories that he was getting published in Hustler and Cavalier magazines, where the Boogeyman comes from. And there's a nasty streak, which I think softened a little bit over the course of his writing.
How did you, really, he softened a bit, did he? Oh, okay. So how did you come across it?
It was one of the ones that I read as a kid that really messed me up. I was a very impatient reader, so I read the short stories first. They were like forbidden fruit. So I was reading The Boogeyman and The Mangler and Trucks, which went on to become Maximum Overdrive, and all of these, all of the kind of like garishly violent short stories that he started out with.
Let me ask you, just before we leave Stephen King, do you obviously you need to show it to him?
Yes.
Explain how that process went.
He read the script just before we went into the production, which was really important for me because this movie is both an adaptation of the short story and sort of a sequel to the short story as well. The short film was kind of encapsulated in Act 1, and then we carry on an entirely different story with a new family who aren't from the short story at all, or have just a vague connection to it. And so I wanted to make sure that King knew what we were doing with his material, and that he felt like we were building on the themes of the short story in a way that he felt was true to his intention. And he read the draft and he loved it. And in fact, he did a really lovely thing, which is he was on a book tour at the time, and every now and then he would just mention out of the blue how much he'd loved the script for Boogeyman and how it was a great example of building on a short story and earning, a 90-minute runtime with something that was from one of his short fiction. And we were shooting the movie, and every so often, somebody would tap me on the shoulder and say, "Have you seen what Stephen King has said about our movie?" And it was a great motivator for us as we slogged through this shoot.
Must be a huge thrill, though, because he is the master. I noticed this morning he tweeted about Succession. He tweeted about a New York Times headline which said, "Succession, why did we care?" And then Stephen King wrote afterwards, "Breaking news, a lot of us didn't." So I thought, okay, that was interesting. But tell us about how you decided to construct the film, because obviously there is a boogeyman.
There is.
That's the title of the movie. How did you sort of talk a lot about how long before we see the boogeyman? How long? Because until you see the shark, until you see the spaceship, what's it gonna look like? Is it? You think I need to hold back? What was your intention?
Yeah, well, the boogeyman is such a kind of ubiquitous character. Everyone's got their own interpretation of him, and I wanted to leave as much space for that as possible. That being said, it is a studio horror movie. People are going to expect this family to show down against the creature at the end. So we're going to see him eventually. But I wanted to make sure that I was leaving a lot for the audience's imagination. And it's funny you mentioned Jaws. Like when we were editing this movie, on the whiteboard outside the edit, we had the runtime of the total screen time of the shark in Jaws and the total screen time of the alien in Alien. And then we had our boogeyman screen time. And we've actually got a second less of screen time of the boogeyman than the shark in Jaws, and a second and a half less than the alien in Alien, because those, they're two of the best horror movies ever made, and leave so much up to your imagination. And I really wanted this to feel like a haunted house movie, where a lot of it was inference and sound and dread, as well as the kind of stabby jump scares that you come to expect in these movies.
Yeah. So you came off dash cam and host, which Mark loved particularly, and you mentioned studio in your last answer. I just wondered what difference that felt like to you as the director to come off the back of those two low budget, let's say, movies into a studio picture like that.
I was spoiling for a fight. I was ready to fight on every single thing, and I thought it was going to be really contentious. And to be honest, I thought it was going to be a horrible experience, and it ended up being completely harmonious. And I think part of that is I wasn't trying to kind of sneak in a A24 art house horror movie. I've always wanted to make a big, fun Friday night horror movie that you can go and see at a multiplex, and this is totally that movie. And that was what I pitched to the studio, and that was the intention going in. That I wanted this to be those two movies. Those two movies are lockdown movies. They're pandemic movies. They're very much movies of they're 2020 and 2021 movies through and through. Whereas this, I wanted to be a classic horror movie that you could pluck from the 1970s, or you could watch 10 years from now, and it would still feel relevant.
Yeah, you'd understand it, and you get it. Quiet Place was one of my favourite films of the last decade. I think.
Yes,
I absolutely loved that film. And you have Scott Beck and Brian Woods, who wrote the screenplay.
Yes,
for that, working on this story. That must have been a thrill.
Yeah, that was one of the things that drew me to this originally. And they were the ones that really cracked that way of breaking the short story and extrapolating it out into this 90-minute feature. They came up with the idea of using King's story as almost act one of a larger piece. And although I didn't work with Beck and Woods that much, they had a draft that I came on board to, and then I worked with Mark Heyman, who's another brilliant writer who wrote Black Swan, and he worked on The Wrestler and all these great movies. So I worked with him to build it out into the movie that ended up on screen. But there's a lot of DNA from Beck and Wood's original draft in there.
Can you? There are quite a few sequences that involve a moonball, which is, and in fact, I think the moonball is in some of the posters that I've seen. I think it was a last-minute replacement for a lightsaber.
It was,
but it's given you some great shots. Just explain how the moonball is important and how you ended up with it.
Well, the character of Sawyer, who's the youngest character, the one who's afraid of the dark, the one that first comes to Dad and says, "There's a boogeyman creature living in my closet." Has had to have this central item that she was going to use to stave off the darkness. And originally it was a lightsaber toy, which is what I had as a kid. I had a crappy knockoff lightsaber. And there's a pivotal sequence in the movie where she's got this moonball toy. And originally it was a lightsaber that was then going to start to malfunction and fritz out in a creepy way. I didn't realize, I'd forgotten that we'd actually cast Vivian Lyra Blair, who plays young Princess Leia in the Star Wars TV show. I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan, so I was unaware of this. But Disney, obviously...
A lot of people won't forgive you for that.
Yeah. So Disney jumped in and said, we can't really have Princess Leia with a crappy knockoff lightsaber fritzing in her hand. No. Not a good look for us. So 2 weeks before we started shooting, they said, you got to replace it. And we Googled madly... glowing children's toy, and we found this moonball and completely rewrote all of those scenes, and it ended up being one of the best bits of the movie and one of the images that belongs to us now. It's one of our defining images.
Yeah, because you can roll it, and it can go all kinds of places that are like. Who needs a lightsaber when you've got a moonball?
Yeah, no, it opens up the space in a great way, and it's got a light inside of it, so it's kind of weighted, so you roll it, but it doesn't roll in a straight line. And there's lots of great stuff that we came up with on the fly.
You mentioned Vivian Lyra Blair, who plays Sawyer, this young kid. I mean, in the movie, she feels like she's 6 or 7 or something like that. Is it difficult to direct a child who, obviously, she is not the target audience for this movie because it is a terrifying film. Is it difficult to make her be terrified? Because earlier on, actually, there's a kid in a crib who is screaming as well.
Yeah. Well, for that kid, I had to speak to the mum. I said, what is she most scared of? And the mum said she's scared of dinosaurs. So on the day, I got a dinosaur costume and crept out of the closet towards that child, with the mum's consent, I might add. But,
right. So that's a properly scared child.
It's a properly scared child. When you're working, that kid was 2 years old. With a 2-year-old, you can only do, there's only so much acting they can do. Vivian, who was 9 when we shot this, is just an extraordinary actor. She's been acting since she was about 3 or 4. She was in Bird Box and the Star Wars series that I can't remember the name of, but
again, a lot of people won't forgive you for that either.
Yeah, but she originally I was kind of talking down to her and patronising her, and you're talking like you would talk to a 9-year-old, and she was just kind of rolling her eyes and putting up with it. But it became, after a couple of days, incredibly apparent that she was just as capable, if not more so, than any of the other actors that I've worked with, and. I'd offer to make loud noises and give kind of scary stimuli for her to react to, and she was like, no, just give me a second. She'd close her eyes, and whatever process she's worked out, she would suddenly, tears would start streaming down her face, and she'd work herself up into a state of panic, do this amazing take, and we'd call cut, and then she'd go back to playing with her toys again.
The father of the Hopper family, played by Chris Messina, is a therapist, and there's another therapist in this film. There's a lot of therapy in the film. I wonder if that 2-year-old baby, toddler, who you freaked out by wearing a dino, wonder if that child is going to end up in therapy and it's going to be your fault.
I think probably. I think Disney are going to pay for that.
What the certification is an interesting one. You know,
Yeah.
what were you aiming for? What did you want, and what is it?
Well, it's a PG-13 in the States. I think it's a 15 over here. I wanted to make a movie that felt. I wanted to make a movie that was open to a wide audience. It's the Boogeyman, so you've got to be able to have a younger audience come and see this movie. This to me is a kind of gateway horror movie. It's the movie that you'll watch that will then breed kind of horror obsessives who will go on to watch the harder stuff like the Evil Deads of the world. But I also wanted to make it about as hard as a PG-13 could be, and I wanted to start with a sequence that showed that we weren't messing around, and this wouldn't be, that nobody in this movie was safe just because the certificate isn't 18. And I also, you don't need to be an R-rated movie or an 18 certificate movie to be scary. That a lot of that is left to the audience's imagination.
It's interesting. That reminds me a lot of A Quiet Place.
Yeah, which is a huge reference for me, and that PG-13 movie as well.
Yeah, which is interesting because that just means in America anyone can see it.
Yeah, basically.
So what do you move on to something more hardcore next? I mean, having introduced people, if this is their gateway into horror, what do you want to do next?
There's a couple of movies that are a little harder that are definitely R-rated movies, but I also just love playing in this space. I mean, like you reference A Quiet Place. That's really the zone that I find myself having most fun in, which is to do with building suspense and paying off scares and kind of toying with the audience. And you don't really need to be showing blood and guts for that. Although I've got a couple of blood and guts movies that I'm really excited about.
Rob Savage, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thanks so much.
Rob Savage, the director of The Boogeyman. I have to say, when I walked into the hotel room where we did the interview,
Yes,
my first reaction was, "But you're a kid in school," because I'm old and he's incredibly young. So he just, he's making a studio picture, so he's doing very well. Can I just say also before you start,
Yeah.
the Stephen King and Succession will come up again, so we will be
Yes.
discussing Succession in take 2, and it'll be a full-length spoiler-tastic edition, and that's coming out. We'll pick up on some of those points, but The Boogeyman.
So you and I saw this together. We saw it in a preview screening in Leicester Square, which had fantastically intrusive security. An awful lot of the film is very, very dark, and the security person took it upon themselves to get out a very bright thing to look across which was one of the most weirdly intrusive.
There's often security at new movies, and for some reason they think critics are the people who are going to be leaking stuff, which of course is never the case.
As if we would know how.
Usually you don't notice them, but this guy was standing there.
He was like it was a real full-on 3D performance. Anyway, it's a credit to the film that didn't distract from it. In the case of Rob Savage's previous work, Host, I haven't seen Dashcam, but Host I thought was brilliant. Of all the lockdown films, Host was the one that was like, wow, that really, really hit the nail on the head. It was such a simple idea. It was a Zoom meeting. It had a seancing. There's kind of an allusion to it in the new film, in The Boogeyman. We have to have a discussion about that as well. But it was a a really brilliant exercise in you can't show anything because there's very little to show, and what visual effects there are in Host are all mechanical, and they're so well done. So, as you said in that interview, this has its roots in a Stephen King story from the angry Stephen King period. Although, of course, this is, as Rob Savage said, this is kind of a sequel to that story. And the story is that Sophie Thatcher is Sadie, who is still in shock from her mother's death. Vivian Lyra Blair is Sawyer, her younger sister, who is beset by dreams of monsters in a very kind of Guillermo del Toro way. I remember Guillermo saying that when he was young, he used to dream that there were monsters in his closet and under his bed, and he had to make friends with them in order for his life to carry on. And then Chris Messina?
Chris Messina, yeah.
Is the widowed father, who is also a therapist, and into whose office comes the young man, well, not the young, comes the man who says, I have been chased by demons, this terrible thing has happened to my family, and then apparently seems to somehow pass on the curse. So this is a kind of fairly well-worked horror story. There have been a couple of films in recent years. I mean, one of them was Antlers. There's another one more recently, the name of which escapes me, about somebody confronting the kind of apparition of a childhood monster that for the most part you don't see the monster because the monster is really symbolic. You know, what is the Boogeyman? Let's do this now. Boogeyman or Bogeyman. In the UK, we would say Bogeyman.
I wouldn't. I mean, I never use the word anyway, but I would say Boogeyman, I think.
Boogeyman is definitely an Americanization. You said that, in fact, they both come from
Middle English, the word is B-U-G-G-E, meaning a frightening spectre, and also scarecrow, and it's where we get bugbear from.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah.
I always think Boogeyman is Casey and the Sunshine Band. I'm the Boogeyman, I'm the Boogeyman.
I was thinking of it as an American, the whole thing I think of as more of an
Fungus
American
the Bogeyman, you must have read Fungus the Bogeyman.
Don't think so, but I'm aware of it.
Okay, fine. So anyway, Boogeyman is just sort of, you know, the amorphous personification of dark thoughts, dreams, monsters under the bed. It's a very, very generic title. And weirdly enough, that very generic title tells you something that's generic about the story. It's a story about grief, about, you know, death, about a family coming to terms with this. Somehow that grief is manifesting itself in a monstrous form. So there are echoes of Poltergeist, there are echoes of Stranger Things. You obviously drew upon the connection to Quiet Place. The question is it done well? And I think that when you consider how generic the story is, and it is very generic, I think that what Rob Savage does is to get the very most out of that generic setup. So, for a good part of the film, an awful lot of the film it's to do with the creaks and shadows of the mind. It's to do with what you don't see. It's to do with people in darkened houses. I know one of the arguments is turn the lights on. Always. But I think the evocation of the darkness, it reminded me somewhat of Nope, in which there's an awful lot of stuff which is done in, you know, nighttime, and it's kind of all the colours of the dark, which is obviously a phrase I love. And I think it does that really well. I think it's at its most successful when it's keeping all the stuff off screen. Now, you had the conversation there with Rob Savage about, I thought it was very funny about timing, the amount of time you see the shark in Jaws, the amount of time you see Alien in Alien, and the amount of time you see the Boogeyman, for want of a better word, in the Boogeyman. And although there is a pleasure to be had in creature effects, I mean, I've always been a big fan of Stan Winston and Pumpkinhead, and of course that connects to aliens and everything. The point at which Boogeyman is at its most effective is when it's not showing you the monster. What it's doing is frightening you with the possibility that there is something monstrous there. And I actually think that sense of mood, that sense of tension, locks this right back into what was great about Host. Because to Host, there was just, and I started watching Host thinking, another lockdown movie, you know, I've already seen Unfriended, which I like, but this isn't going to get anywhere near to that. And then, of course, it did. Host really, really creeped me out. This didn't frighten me in the same way that Host did.
Didn't frighten me either, actually.
But I enjoyed it, because what I thought was, if you're going to do stuff lurking in the shadows, if you're going to do the very Poltergeist, there's a scene in Poltergeist, which is really famous now, when the boy looks under one side of the bed and then under the other side of the bed. And then he sits up and suddenly the clown doll is behind him. And it's absolutely terrifying. There's also a scene in this which seems to specifically refer in Poltergeist that she gets taken into the television. And there's a sort of a slight riff on that here. But all the stuff that works the best is the performances really make you think, okay, these are people who are dealing with genuine trauma. So Sophie Thatcher was fantastic in the lead as the teenager who goes to school and her friends aren't sympathetic. I mean, they're kind of trying to be sympathetic, but are they really trying to be sympathetic? And then there's the thing when she's wearing her mother's dress and somebody says, well, that's really creepy. And she says, why is it creepy? You know, well, it creeps me out. And that, the kind of the brutality of school life. So I think he's a very fine director. I think the story is very generic. And I think that it's, as he said, a big multiplex, blockbuster movie. It'd be interesting to know whether or not the multiplex crowd feels shortchanged in terms of they've got so used to quiet, bang, quiet, bang. And this, obviously, there's a certain amount of, creeping around and then revelation. But I wouldn't describe this as a quiet, bang movie. I think it's much more to do with a genuine sense of creeping dread and anxiety. And I think that the performances are the thing that root it in that. I'm less bothered when it actually gets into monster stuff, because although I like creature effects, I'm much more bothered by that cold hand on the back of the neck. But I thought it was pretty solid work. I don't think it has the individuality of Host, and it'd be interesting to see what Rob Savage does next. Because what I would like is for him to have the facilities, the expanse that he's had with this, but also the originality of something like Host. What do you think?
I think it's I'm surprised it's a 15. I think it felt to me
borderline 12, isn't it?
I'm not a horror fan, but I thought it was perfectly acceptable, and borderline 12. It's given that you can see pretty much everything in a 15. I think that would be anyway. It is a 15, so that's what.
So what they say is strong horror, brief, bloody images, and in fact, when you look at the BBFC content advice, it does. Out of 5 stars, violence 3 stars, threat and horror 4, which is interesting because it means it's the mood as much as anything. Language 3, also injury detail it has 4, but the injury detail is so fleeting. It's not salacious.
So see the Boogeyman. Let us know what you think. Correspondence at kerbinandmayo.com. Ads in a minute, Mark. But first, let's just lighten the load one more time. Not in the pulpit this week, but let's go into the laughter lift. I'm not impressed with Child 3 at the moment.
Okay.
He tested some jokes out on me for his stand-up set, but the one he told me was absolutely revolting and involved defecation.
Oh, dear.
There's no need for that. Poo jokes are absolutely not my favourite kind, but they are a solid number 2.
And also in the Mayo family, that has a particular try-hard.
Thank you. I am a little bit cross, though, Mark. I'm not sure if you saw the news, but some miscreant has been selling our laughter lift jokes on the streets of New York.
No.
They've set up a stall next to an artisan bread shop selling our jokes for 5 cents each. It's a pun per nickel.
Very good. It's pun per nickel.
I suppose we shouldn't be too harsh on people, though, Mark. Judge less and understand more. That's what I say. You never know what someone has been through. For example, as a child, I was forced to walk the plank. We couldn't afford a dog, so that was the way that went. And finally, Mark, what's blue and smells like red paint?
Blue paint.
Correct. Anyway, look. Yes. What's still to come? You don't get any points for that, by the way.
Okay.
What's still to come?
I'm going to be reviewing Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Back after this, unless you're a Vanguardista, in which case your new haircut looks so much better than the old one, and your service will not be interrupted. And we're back. Email from Yale Grushka Cocaine, president of the Decision Analysis Society, informs.
Pardon?
Yale Grushka Cocaine,
No, they got that
president
bit.
of the Decision Analysis Society, and then in capital letters, informs. I'm just saying that's the sign-off, okay? I'm writing with regards to the recent conversation about movie one-liners that are now part of common discourse at home.
Oh, I see. Yes.
2 sentences get used often in our house under very specific circumstances. When one of us is upset by something that clearly isn't worthy of upsetting us or is outside of our control, like delayed travel or lost luggage, that kind of thing, in an effort to help diffuse the situation, we will say to each other, "It's only noodles, Michael." This line from my all-time favourite #1 movie immediately reminds us that we shouldn't get all upset and wound up over something that we cannot control, change, or otherwise is worth our anger. When someone brings in a totally new line of conversation and is distracting from an important, still ongoing conversation, we will say, "Don't cross the streams." We all know that implies that we should get closure in the original conversation before moving on to the next.
So that's Lost Boys and Ghostbusters.
Yes. Lost Boys, okay. Ghostbusters, definitely. Yale says, thank you for your show and all you do to fill in the time during my daily runs, because I listen to episodes on repeat, my long drives and otherwise whenever I need someone to keep me company. I like the idea that we're just filling in the time. That's what we do. We're here to fill in the time.
None More Black is the thing that I use a lot, although I realise that an awful lot. I saw that the Ruttles is, I think, up there for me with Spinal Tap, and that has, all that stuff about no fixed hairstyle and, only an amateur drinker, and it's all those phrases. The phrase that gets used most for me, which isn't from a movie but movie related, is Nick Jones, my very good friend who I work with on documentaries, often refers to an adult beverage, because that was a term that William Peter Blatter used when we were around at his house doing an interview, and he said, "Would you gentlemen care for an adult beverage?"
Okay. Well,
I love that phrase.
I mean, Withnail is what you quote a lot.
Withnail a lot, absolutely. Here.
Adult beverage sounds as though it could have come from that. I think the only thing that we have remotely used might be too many notes.
Too many notes all the time.
Because that kind of works. Correspondence at kermode.com. Spider-Man
Across the Spider-Verse, which is the new animation that follows on...
Sorry, is there any punctuation in that?
Yes, Spider-Man, Spider-Man :
an N dash or an M dash?
An N dash, I believe, because it's between the things. I mean, let me just call it the actual... So this is... Okay, Spider, capital S, Spider, dash, N dash, man.
Right.
Colon.
Yes.
Across the Spider dash verse.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Carry on.
This is like working for the Monthly Film Bulletin, because that's the Monthly Film Bulletin getting the punctuation of a title and the exact way the title was a really, really big deal. And they used to have this rule, which was that it had to be the way that the title appeared on screen.
Yes.
Well, no, because like AI, artificial intelligence, the way that appears on screen is that an A comes in from one side of the screen and an I comes in from the other side of the screen, and then they cross. It's
those folk in Compositors Corner are
really
clearly going crazy.
So Spider-Man : Across the Spider-Verse, which is it follows on from Into the Spider-Verse, and it will be followed by Beyond the Spider-Verse, because like Fast 10, Your Seatbelts, this doesn't have an ending. It has
just stops.
No, it doesn't stop. It's to be continued, because there's another one coming. So it's 2.25 hours long, something like that. But you have to wait for the next one. Screenplay co-written by Lord and Miller, who are the team behind Lego Movie and Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, who sort of set all this in motion. New directing team, including Kent Powers, who we were talking about in relation to Soul. Also co-written by David Callahan. So this picks up... I'll do a very, very brief bit of plot, but this is not really a film in which doing a plot synopsis is going to help very much. Firstly, I don't want to give any spoilers away, although honestly I don't know that I could. And secondly, because it's a multiverse movie, and in the way of proper multiverse movies, meaning, everything everywhere all at once, they can't really be summed up in a simple plot, because the whole point about them is there are multiple things going on at the same time. However, Miles Morales, Mick Moore, teams up with Gwen Stacy, Haley Steinfeld, to help fight the Spot, who is threatening to tear worlds, plural,
the Spot
apart. Yeah. Okay. And then the adventure takes them into the Spider-Verse, to Spider Society, which is a land of spider people. They find themselves out of sync with the There are many conflicts, and there are many versions of many versions of Spider-Man, Spider People, Spider Person, Spider Things. Actually, some of them aren't even. It is a multiple world, and the way in which the multiple world is expressed on screen is through a series of animations that every time they go into a different world, the animation style will change. It's all very, very distinct. So each world has got its own aesthetic. At one point, it looks like, Akira. The next, it's Gonzo. The next it's Sid Mead futurism. The next it's 3-color comic strip. The next it's Jamie Hewlett punk. So every single world has a distinct vision, and we pinball and career through these worlds at a rate of knots. The film moves like a bullet. I mean, at times it's kind of like you want it to stop, because during I don't know whether you remember, but during the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, one of the problems was whenever they started doing action sequences, the action sequences looked terribly CG. They hadn't figured out a way of making the swinging through the streets look good on screen. And of course, it's because the origin is a comic strip in which all that stuff was, you could draw it, but it was very, very hard to render physically. Well, somehow the Spider-Verse movies are the best of the Spider-Mans, because what they're doing is they're taking that aesthetic and they're going, okay, well, this is what it would look like if it was moving. And so sometimes it's like flicking through a comic book at high speed. Everything is coming at you. Everything is coming at you all the time. Also, an awful lot of sound and vision. Daniel Pemberton's score is absolutely keeping pace with the action. I mean, it's breathtaking. It's occasionally exhausting. Sometimes it's kind of like being in the company of one of those people who's just got so much stuff they want to tell you. They want to tell you about it now, and you really go. And then there's this other thing that they want. So it's kind of a bit like, okay, fine. The remarkable thing about it is that in the middle of all this stuff, there's so much stuff. I mean, so much stuff. You actually find, these are real characters that I care about. Because the core things are the same. It's to do with adolescence. It's to do with identity. It's to do with finding your place in the world, or the worlds, in which there's more than one possible outcome of any event. It's about worrying about whether or not tragedy is inevitable or tragedy can be avoided. Whether it's possible that this version of yourself could have gone in a different way and been a different version of yourself. What it means, and at the center of it is a character who by their very nature is out of sync with where they are. They're in the wrong place. That's the central Spider-Man thing. Of all of the comic book heroes, Spider-Man was always the kid who was suddenly saddled with this power, and in the original inceptions of Spider-Man, was then set upon by everybody who, on the one hand, he's friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. On the other hand, you've got newspapers and things saying, well, he's a criminal, he's a terrorist, he's a terrible person. The whole central thing about Spider-Man is he's a fish out of water. I mean, the spider is a fish. So if I can hear this, breaking in the case of this, it takes that idea and multiplies it by n when n is any large number. And yet what's extraordinary is that as it barrels along and as it throws all these different visual formats and these really smart, funny gags that come by so far, I mean, like in the Lego movie, you have to watch the thing 3 times, otherwise you're going to miss half the gags. I mean, there are really, really good gags, but they're fleeting. At the center of it is characters that you care about in situations that, despite all the madness, actually seem believable. And you go, yeah, I sympathize with the emotional plight. And there are these lovely quiet moments. I mean, they're fleeting, these lovely, lovely quiet moments, which have all the sort of, you think I'm effectively watching a rotoscope domestic drama about parents and children and lost ones and loved ones and longing, and then it goes and it flies off in a million different directions. So, exhausting, here's what it is. I've just arrived at this.
Okay. It
is exhausting, but it is not exhausted.
No, because there are more to come.
Another one coming.
Okay, but you will be exhausted. Okay, but it sounds like another hit film is what it sounds like.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Let's do What's On now. This is where you email us a voice note about your festival or special screening from wherever you are in the world. You send it to correspondence@kermodeandmayo.com. Here we go. This week's correspondence sound like this.
Hi Mark and Simon, Steve here from the Documentary Film Council, a new democratic member-led body for the UK's independent documentary film industry. The DFC has been developed in consultation with filmmakers and organisations from across the sector with support from the Arts and Humanities Research Council, and will be launching at Sheffield DocFest on Saturday, June 17th. For more information, please visit documentaryfilmcouncil.co.uk. Tinkety tonk, down with the Nazis and up with UK independent docs.
Simon and Mark. This is Stephen Moyer, sometime actor and currently coming to you with my director hat on. MTL, FTE, although strictly speaking, this is a voice note. My dog Bonnie won a very highly commended rosette for the dog with the waggliest tail at the Herongate May Fete in 1976, and I was standing very close to her at the time. Simon, I was on your show many a moon ago for the thing I did with the teeth, and a lovely time I had. Mark, we have not met, but I like your hair very much. My second feature, A Bit of Light, starring the good lady thespian producer Erin Dawes, plus Mr. Ray Winston, Pippa Bennett-Warner and Yusuf Kapoor, written by my brilliant friend Rebecca Callard, is playing the Black Tie Gala performance of the Southend Film Festival on June the 8th. Ray is the patron of the festival, but may have some issues getting there, as our team, West Ham, are in their first European final in 40 years the evening before, in Prague, and it could be messy. Tickets are available at www.southendfilmfestival.com. Tickety tonk, etc., and thank you for the fantastic show.
Well,
Wow.
Extensive, but how fabulous and how actorly was Stephen Moyer. He's talking about A Bit of Light launching at the Southend Film Festival June the 8th. I don't remember. He says, I came on and did something with my teeth.
So I just Googled him and teeth. What I should probably do is put you in there, though. Hang on, this is what came up. Never go to a newspaper website, for heaven's sake. It's just so many things. Go poppity pip pop pop. There.
Fake teeth. Okay. All right. Anyway, Stephen, thank you very much. We appreciate that. And very nice for you to perform your voice note like that with lots of topical references.
Vampy vamp vamp.
Okay. Very nice. And Steve from the Documentary Film Council, I love the way he called it the DFC, which obviously, but it makes it sounded like the DMZ. And
That's
I was
right.
thinking, wow, it's like wartime. Amateur-led body supporting filmmakers launching at the Sheffield Doc Fest on June the 17th. Can you outperform both Steves? If you can, or you just want to tell us about the thing that you're most proud of, a screening or a festival, send your 20-second, or to be honest, I mean, Steve Moy didn't take any notice of
Did
the
you
time
interview him
duration.
about the bastard executioner? Is that what it
No idea.
Oh.
Anyway, send your 20-second or 30-second or 60, whatever it is. Send us your audio trailer about your event anywhere in the world to correspondence@kermodeandmayo.com. I think that's it. Yes, that's it. That's the end of take one.
Well, you sound underwhelmed.
I was
Is that
just
it?
checking. No,
Have we done enough?
Was there anything else? Another piece of paper? But no. It's the end of take one. This has been a Sony Music Entertainment production. The team was Lily Hamley, Ryan O'Meara, Sancho Panza, Gully Tickell, and welcome to the team, Beth Perkin. Hannah Talbot was the producer. Simon Paul was the redactor, even though he didn't turn up, claiming it was a train strike. I mean, it is a train strike, but
We got here.
and everyone else got here. But anyway, carry on. Mark, what is your film of the week?
Well, because I'd really like people to support it, and I think it's a really interesting film, I'm going to go for Reality.
Thank you for listening. Extra takes with a bonus review, bunch of recommendations, and even more stuff about the movies and cinema-adjacent television is available right now, including our conversation about Succession. Spoiler-tastic, obviously. Take 3 will arrive in your device's inbox next Wednesday. Thanks very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as we enjoyed making it. While you're here, check out all the other videos because they're cool too, aren't they?
Yeah, and if you want to keep up to date with everything Kermode and Mayo's Take, then check out our social channels.
I mean, why wouldn't you?
I mean, I would. I have done.
Excellent.